Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Catholic Prison Ministry Coalition monthly town hall meeting. And today we are talking about understanding trauma through the river of cruelty with Audra Fullerton. But before I introduce Audra to you, there's a few little housekeeping things I just want to kind of go over. We want everybody to kind of stay on mute. But also, if you have any questions that come up during this presentation, please feel free to put it in the chat and we will address them at the end. Again, thank you for spending time with us on this next hour, and we thank you for joining us in our monthly presentations. And at the end, we will also go over the upcoming events for CPMC. So again, let's just put ourselves in the presence of God. And I am this morning or this afternoon, depending on where you are, going to do a prayer for the incarcerated. So in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit, amen. Good and gracious God, we lift to you those who are incarcerated and their families. Fill them with your presence, letting them know that you will never leave them nor forsake them, no matter what they have done. Lead them to turn to you in full surrender by confessing their sins and placing it all on the altar of forgiveness. Send a wave of forgiveness over them, ensuring them that as far as the east is from the west, you have already forgiven them. Place a hedge of protection around their families and send them your provision for the children they might have left behind, giving them an assurance that no need will go unmet. Help the children to grow in wisdom, grace, and mercy, and that in their absence, you are guiding them. We pray in the name of your Son, Jesus. Amen. Again, so on this morning, we have Audra Fullerton, from the program director of the Peaceful Families Program at the Family Peace Initiative. We also have with her Sheri Shideler, who is also a graduate of the program, of the Peaceful Families Program. So again, we welcome Sheri and Audra, and we're going to just let them have the rest of they can kind of tell you more about the programs and their initiative. And as we go forth, again, don't forget to put any questions in the chat so that we can get to those at the end. So let's just give Audra and Sheri a hand clap and welcome to our town hall meeting for today.
Dr. Limor, thank you so much, and thank you all for joining us. I'm so thrilled to be here, and anytime I get to share some space with Ms. Sheri, I'm so excited. So I'm really grateful for the opportunity to just be with you today, and I want this time to be useful to you as well. So please don't hold back on the questions. Please don't hold back on the feedback. Throw it in the chat, and we will do our best to get those questions answered and get those comments heard. So as Dr. Limor said, I'm Audra Fullerton. I work at an agency called the Family Peace Initiative out of Topeka, Kansas. It started as what's called a battering intervention program. Specifically, our co-founders and co-directors, they are a married couple. She was running a domestic violence shelter in rural Kansas and was noticing multiple folks coming to her services from the same partner. That she would help someone, they would leave the relationship. A couple of years later, she'd help that partner's next partner. And so she started holding classes for folks who were perpetrating domestic violence. And that's how the Family Peace Initiative was born. And 25 years later, we are holding community-based BIP, which is battering intervention programming classes, and have developed a curriculum and an approach to our work that folks have applied to lots of other areas, including education and in the youth correctional facilities. And where I got to meet Sheri was the Topeka Correctional Facility asked us to come in and hold a program for folks there that could be both a trauma healing and healthy relationships course. And so I'm here to tell you a little bit about that course, and Sheri and I can share with you our experience in the work that we did together. And I have to tell you that work inside correctional facilities has been some of my favorite work. And so I'm cheering on the work that you all are doing, and want to give you tools and support for that work. And so so I'm excited to be here with fellow folks. Sheri, well, so I might just introduce us all a little bit to the Family Peace Initiative. We won't spend too much time on all of that, but we are based in Topeka, Kansas, and we've come, so we started as a BIP program, developed into a couple of other programs that I mentioned, and also have really focused on helping facilitators, other folks who are running groups, who are doing trauma-informed, trauma-focused work, and any kind of work that is really facilitating transformational change. That is our facilitator training series that we're helping folks develop skills, whether they're using our curriculums and our programming, or whether they're using other programming. Our training series is really about our approach to the work and the kind of spaces we are working to create. So we do that through our three pillars of our work are really compassion, integrity, and expertise. And we believe that cruelty doesn't come from nowhere. Cruelty comes from cruelty. And so long before anyone is cruel to another person, they're treated cruelly first. But not everyone who is treated cruelly passes that along to other folks. And so what we really strive to do is to find that fork in the road and help folks get back to that fork. We do that by leading by example and by bringing our vulnerability to the room. And we'll talk a little bit about that. So just a really quick rundown on the actual Peaceful Families program. It's about a 6-month program. And for those of you that do prison ministry and work in correctional facilities, that's a long program for many facilities. But I will tell you that we also had the longest wait list of any program in the facility. So folks were really patient and worked with us to get in there. It was a voluntary program. We did no marketing. It was really just word of mouth from the relatives and the residents that were in facility. But once we did get together, we met for either 90 minutes or 2 hours, depending on the location, twice a week. And it usually took us about 6 months to get from orientation to graduation. Over the course of the program development, we started with one little pilot class of 8 people. And when COVID hit, which kind of shut us down, when COVID hit, we were running 4 classes at the same time with 8 participants and 2 peer leaders, graduates who had graduated the program and had committed to going around again, specifically in that servant leader role, where they could provide leadership and mentorship for the first-time participants. And Sheri can speak to that experience. It was an amazing crop of folks. We had over 30 folks that served as peer leaders in the course of about 6 years. And so just really briefly, I am not great at collecting data. And so I'm confident that there's all sorts of ways that we could have been better at measuring what we were doing. But the one way that we did collect some data was just how much are folks getting disciplinary reports? How much are they getting written up? How much of their behavior is affecting the other folks at the facility? And what we compared was the 6 months before they came to the program, the 6 months during the program, and then the 6 months after. And as you can see, there was a pretty significant decrease in the number of DRs, as they were called in our facility, disciplinary reports that folks were getting. And the color coding is the severity of the DRs. So we ran at right around a 50% decrease over the course of the program. When we ended, we had the most amount of attendees, and we ended at about 44% decrease in total write-ups over the course of the program. And so we want to get into it. I'm seeing some great questions come in. Keep them up. And Dr. Limor, if there's anything that you want us to speak to, please don't hesitate. But before we jump into all that, I want Sheri to get a chance to get her voice in the room. Sheri, tell us a little bit about you and your experience with the program.
So I'm Sheri. I'm really excited to be here. Audra is one of my favorite people I met. I was incarcerated 12 and a half years for drug-related crime. And I was there about 8 years, I think, before I met Audra. I'd been hearing about the program. It was being hummed about in the penitentiary. And it took me a little while to get into class because there was a long waiting list for it. And once I took it, it was life-changing for me. And I wanted to go again and be a peer leader because I wanted to just thoroughly clean my house and help others understand where their trauma has come from. So I was excited to have gotten in the class. I was excited. I was nervous in the beginning because I had to learn that I was going to be very vulnerable. I had to open up about some things that were very personal, some very private stuff that we don't always talk about out in public. I didn't understand that. Oops, I am so sorry. I had to learn what cruelty was. Cruelty, because it wasn't really a word I used a lot, cruelty. And now I think daily of that blatant disregard for others. Whether that be I'm gonna pull out of a stoplight before them or not. I mean, just it's a blatant disregard for others. So learning those things, learning that I was going to be responsible for the trauma that I had caused others, and then learning that I was going to be responsible for my own healing. And those things were very eye-opening to me, very scary for me. But yet I was hearing such great things from the people that had taken the class and how much it changed their mindset of who they were and who they could be. So with those things all in mind, I was ready to go into the program full force. And like I said, very excited when I got done at what all I had learned and to take it again. And it definitely has made a difference in my life. So I don't know if you want me to get into cruelty yet, or if you want to explain that.
Well, I love that you brought that up, Sheri. And because that is one of we're going to walk through a foundational principle, a core element of our programming, an element that we use in any setting that we are in. And just as Sheri mentioned, we talk a lot about cruelty. We talk about cruelty as the blatant disregard of another, or the intentional infliction of pain and suffering. And when I think about cruelty, the intentional infliction of pain and suffering is usually what comes to mind first. But it was really that second definition that had a huge impact on my life too, just that blatant disregard of another. And so if I'm really wanting to be aware of the ways that I've been blatantly disregarded and the impacts on those, and also be aware of the ways that I've blatantly disregarded others, when I've made it about me, when I've done what I want to do and I didn't really care about how it impacted the other person, then all of a sudden I'm aware of all sorts of things in my life that I can work on and work to clean up. And so many of you have probably heard of the ACE study. If you haven't, feel free to Google it. There's a lot of amazing information out there. On our website, we have a video toolbox, and there's a great video from Dr. Fullerton, who was the original doctor who did the ACE study and sort of stumbled into it on accident, quite honestly. And what the ACE study tells us is that the things that happen to us in these very important developmental stages as a child, these adverse childhood experiences, cruelty. When we experience cruelty as a child, it impacts our adult life in all sorts of pretty measurable ways. The more ACE points that we have, the higher the likelihood of all sorts of health issues, physical health issues, heart disease, autoimmune diseases, stomach and digestive issues, but also mental health things. We're more likely to be prescribed psychotropic medications, more likely to have substance use issues. And so we know that these things are connected. What I want to help folks get after is all the stuff in between, because that's important. When you look at the ACE quiz, it asks 10 questions about a pretty small slice of life. It asks 10 questions about home life in childhood. I don't know about you, but I had a lot of experiences that weren't at home, at school, with peers, in community groups, even in church. A lot of experiences that impact me, both adversely and incredibly positively. And if we're only looking at what happens at home, we're missing a huge swath. So the ACE study is great at helping us be aware that, oh, there's some stuff here I need to look at, but we want to be sure that we're not starting and ending with the ACE quiz, right? It's a great place to start the conversation, but it is also an impactful thing to walk through. And so what we're going to do today is build what we call the river map. And this is specifically the river of cruelty. And just like cruelty is not the only thing we experience, there's also all sorts of other things. Cruelty has a very unique impact on our life. And so building this map today is an opportunity to really just chart out, how did the experiences I experienced impact my life specifically? So in the chat, I think Kara is going to be able to share with you a document that you can download. There's 2 River of Cruelty documents. The first one is an info sheet that tells you a little bit about it and has a teeny tiny little map on it. And the second one is a map. And so after the call, you're welcome to download that and use that map. But basically what we're going to do is we're going to build 5 lists. And oftentimes what I do is I just turn a piece of paper sideways and I draw 4 lines, and that will give you 5 lists. If you would like to follow along at home and build your own map, if you'd prefer to just hang tight and watch the process, that's totally okay too. The only thing I would say is if you do choose to build your own map, it can stir up some feelings. And that doesn't make me nervous in the least, because we are humans and feelings are part of what makes us human. But if you don't see it coming, sometimes it can be a surprise, or it can take us out of our window of tolerance. And so just take care of yourself. There's no pressure to do any more than you would like to in this particular call. And so Sheri has agreed to help us with this, which I'm so grateful for. And so Sheri, when you think about the cruelty that you experienced, and we'll just focus on 18 years and younger, what comes to mind for you?
So that's a really hard question, because I always wanted to think I had a great childhood. Everything was fine. We had a normal life. We did lots of things. But then whenever I thought about the household things and the things that go on, like that everybody doesn't see, because of this class, I was able to realize that I had trauma that I never had dealt with. And my mom and dad did the best that they could. So I definitely could never blame them, just as I did the best I could. My kids had a river themselves that was created. And so some of the cruel things that I never thought were cruel until I went into this class, but some of the cruelty that I experienced as a child was moving a lot. So my family moved a lot. My dad worked for the government, and we moved about 6 times during my 18 years. And it doesn't feel like that should be traumatizing, but yet it was. I had to figure out how to say goodbye to my friends that I was moving states away from, and then how to make new friends again, and how to start life again, and what about the things I was involved in. And so moving was traumatizing for me. I was the second of 4 children. And so my 2 younger siblings, I became kind of like a mom too, because my mom was working full time, my dad was working full time. So I was doing adult duties at 6 years old. I was pulling the chair to the washing machine to unload the clothes, pulling the chair to the sink to do dishes, helping to change my siblings' diapers. Just things that your mom would ask you to do. And at that age, I didn't really think it was wrong. So I did a lot of babysitting. There was a lot of yelling that went on in the household. There was a lot of shaming. I didn't get this done, or I didn't get that done, or why didn't I get my homework done? I was embarrassed a lot. Just embarrassed, humiliated, probably belittled because I couldn't keep up and try to be a kid. My dad was drinking, but not excessively, but he was a regular drinker. But he was out of town a lot too. So my mom was really raising us on our own. He was out of town at work. And so just my dad being gone was traumatizing. I still to this day look at my dad as the savior, and I don't know why, because back then that's what I did, I guess. So those are some of the cruelties that happened to me. I was disregarded a lot, disregarded that she's 7 years old and wants a Barbie house or wants to play with dolls. And then granted, I did have toys, but I had a lot of adult responsibilities. So I like I said, none of that I thought was cruel until I look back, and I've got grandkids of my own now, and I would never even think that that was okay to make them be the babysitter. But like I said, my mom did the best she could and was trying to work as well. So those were some of the cool things that I was involved in.
Yeah.
That I took off the top of my head.
It's a great list, Sheri. And things that we commonly hear in the classroom, and Sheri, you can help me with this list. And also for folks that are in the conversation, what would you add to this list? What are ways that children can be treated cruelly before the age of 18? I would say that oftentimes when we have this conversation in our groups, that we can make whole lists just based on any particular ism. So all the ways that someone might be treated cruelly because of racism, because of sexism, because of homelessness and poverty and that experience, because of, we could pick any isms, gender identity and sexual orientation. When we're thinking about intentionally hurt or blatantly disregarded, we can make this list really substantial. And so if we're gonna add 5 more things, what's missing? Thanks, Sharon, I got name calling. Just throw it in the chat.
Hitting.
Thanks, Sheri.
A lot of kids get hit. I didn't, but hitting is bad.
And those conversations are quite interesting because folks will talk about, oh, I got a whooping. And when we ask, well, let's just make a list of the things that kids get whooped with, that list is profound. We're talking match car, Hot Wheels tracks, extension cords, shoes, hairbrushes, pans, sticks. We're not talking about a whooping, we're talking about beatings. These are great coming into the chat. Thanks, Mary. Thanks, Sharon. And so for your map, if you would like to make your own river of cruelty map, then just make a list. What are the ways that you were blatantly disregarded or intentionally hurt or made to suffer? And that list, I will tell you, the way that our brains hold really painful memories is super interesting. It doesn't really give it back to us until we're ready. And so I still find myself remembering things that I hadn't really thought of for a while. So this is just, oftentimes it's just the beginning. Sheri, I don't know, did you find yourself adding things to the list?
Yes, for the whole 6 months.
Yeah.
I would go back and add that, and I forgot about that. And the cruelty that I did to others too. I mean, I had to think about that as well. So yeah, all these lists you can just continue to add to, and Yeah. The list
Yeah.
got very long.
And the reason why this is important is because every one of these experiences, when we were treated cruelly, we had an emotional response. That's not weird. That's human. And when you think about kiddos, they're learning how to do everything. They don't have that resistance built up. When they feel something, they feel it big, right? They feel all of it and they feel it big. And that's not weird. That's a normal part of human development. And so when we experienced these cruelties, what were some of the adverse emotions that you felt, Sheri? What was that experience like if you were just going to put words to those feelings?
Oh boy. I felt like I had to hide them mostly. You don't really show your feelings at any point as a child, particularly. You don't cry. You mask your feelings. I felt abandoned. I felt shamed. I certainly felt ugly and hopeless. Yeah, that's my general list of what I've got on there. I didn't deserve, I was undeserving.
It's a powerful list, Sheri. Thank you. And when you think about the things that are, when any of you in the room think about things that are on the list of cruelties, what other, if we were to put 2 or 3 more feelings on the list, what comes to mind? How do we feel when we're treated cruelly? Before we learn how to shut it down and escape those hard feelings, how do we feel? I remember feeling invisible and incredibly sad.
Yes.
Thanks, Kimberly. Yeah, embarrassed, shamed, self-conscious, and lonely, absolutely. It's a great list. And as we look at this list, the reason we call them adverse emotions is because these are the feelings that when we wake up in the morning, I'm not waking up hoping that I get to feel invisible and lonely today. I'm building my life to avoid these feelings. And what's supposed to happen in human development is that cruelty is a pretty typical part of development, even, and a case can be made that the folks we're working with often have experienced more than their fair share of cruelty. And there's absolutely, it's not ideal, but it's common for folks to experience cruelty. And what's supposed to happen is that when they feel big feelings, they're supposed to have around age 4 or 5 adults around kiddos to say, oh, of course you feel sad because your friends are excluding you. Here's what I do when I feel sad. I'll just sit with you while you cry. It's okay. Your sad's not weird. Let's do it together. But if we don't have that kind of coaching and understanding, then kids are on their own. And I can tell you in my experience, I was pretty on my own as far as managing feelings goes. And when we're on our own, it quickly becomes more than we can manage. And so now the idea is, this is more than I can manage. I need to shut it down or escape it. And that's when we turn on our defense systems. And what we're defending against is the feelings. I want to be real clear about that. We're defending ourselves, yes, from the cruelty, but long after the cruelty has passed, we continue to defend ourselves from the feelings associated with those memories, with those experiences, with that situation. And Sheri, what comes to mind when you think about your defenses? What kinds of things have you done to shut them down and escape your feelings?
Oh, I tried hard to be a perfectionist. I tried hard to be thorough. I'm very sarcastic. I will use sarcasm to hurt you badly. I have lied, said I did the laundry and I didn't. I have a fear of failing. I'm bossy, very bossy. I avoid people.
Mm.
I deny things and I minimize. These are the strongest ones I can think of right now. And
It's a
I'm not
great list.
proud to say any of that because that sounds like just a horrible person, but it's just what you do to defend yourself.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
If you just check in with your body, how are you feeling? Mad, sad, glad, or afraid?
Right now, probably a tad of afraid. I'm mostly glad, but a tad of afraid because I'm exposing my personal story in a nutshell, not over 6 months where we got to know each other. But I got to hear your story too.
Yeah.
A little bit afraid.
I appreciate that, Sheri. I won't leave you out on that branch on your own. I know for defense systems, for me, I had a lot of alcohol and drug use at a pretty young age. I also kind of went both directions. I went the overachiever side that you had mentioned, but I also spent a lot of time completely being selfless and serving others to a fault. I'm sure that many of you can think of lots of really productive ways for 8th grade, 7th grade girls to spend their time, but organizing sweaty football jerseys is probably not one of them. It's not the top of the list. But man, that's what I did. And I sat by the sidelines at practice every day after school, ready to serve those boys, ready to give all of my time and my energy and my ability to organize things to the boys because they had value and I didn't have value anyway, so I might as well just be helpful. And so there's all sorts of ways that we defend ourselves, and we'll talk about the beliefs that were also in action for me, but all sorts of defense systems, things that we do to avoid and escape our feelings. Now, the conversation that we've had with Karen that really inspired our time together was around domestic violence. And that's where the Family Peace Initiative really focuses a lot of our energy. And when I think about ways that I have defended against my feelings, I have been really controlling. I appreciate, Sheri, that you said bossy. Me too. I've talked over people. I've kind of steamrolled my opinion. I've done things the way that I want to do them. I've yelled and I've been violent.
I'll manipulate things. I'm embarrassed to say that, but I'm a manipulator. But yeah, I try really hard not to, but I have.
Thanks. And so many of the behaviors that we see, and they get put into the bucket of domestic violence or bullying or sexual harassment. And that's not to minimize the impact of those things. But when we're trying to help folks do other things, it's important to recognize that, oh, this is a defense. They're protecting themselves from something. And if we can figure out what that is and have them be a little less afraid of that thing, they might be able to consider different behaviors. But that's the deal with defense systems. When we are in our defenses, we are being cruel. We are either being cruel to ourselves by shutting ourselves down, or we are being cruel to other people by saying, no, I'm going to tend to my needs first. I'm working hard to avoid this feeling, and so I'm just going to give this feeling to you so you can feel afraid, and then I don't have to feel afraid. So I'm just going to yell at you until you're afraid, and now I don't have to be afraid. And so identifying when we're in our defense systems can be really important because by definition, if I'm in my defenses, it's pretty likely that I'm being cruel to either myself or other folks. Now, there are some behaviors that just because we're doing that behavior doesn't mean that we are in our defenses. I was in a conversation just yesterday about exercise. You know, if I am a marathon runner and I'm training for a marathon, there are absolutely folks that I've had this conversation with that they have said, yes, I have overdone the exercising, because if I stopped exercising, when I was exercising, I didn't have to think about the mess that I had at home. I didn't have to think about my relationship with my estranged mom. I didn't have to think about all the ways that I was afraid I was failing as a parent. I could just go to the gym and be there. And I was doing the right thing, all the socially acceptable things, right? And I'm building this beautiful body that the world will see as acceptable. But what I'm not telling you is that what's driving that behavior is that I am terrified of feeling my feelings about the stuff that's going on in my life. But there are also folks that are absolutely exercising, and it's not a defense. It's not an escape hatch. It's not an avoidance. It's a part of a balanced life, or imbalanced in my case, if I get a little bit of exercise in now and again. Not sure that I'm quite to balanced yet, but we're getting closer. And so I want to be really clear about that just because there's a behavior that's on this list doesn't mean that it's by default a defense system. But if I'm being cruel to another person, chances are I'm and the downside of defenses, the downside of living life in our defenses is that, you know, if I am 13 and I'm gonna escape all of this hard stuff that's happening at home by sneaking out and drinking with my friends, I'm not doing that with a vision of someday being an addict. I'm not doing that with the vision of someday having a DUI or having an unintended pregnancy. But when we're in our defenses, it invites all sorts of unintended consequences into our lives. So there might be court cases, there might be unintended pregnancies. Sheri, what would you add to this list?
Bad relationships.
Did you say bad relationships?
Yeah, bad relationships. Even
Mhm.
with my sister, I have a bad relationship.
Mm.
I have lost friends. I went to prison for 12 and a half years.
Yeah, I think about, you know, a lot of lost opportunities for me and lost dreams, things that are just out of
Yeah.
reach because
Right.
my path went a certain way.
Yeah, I feel like I lost a chunk of my life that could have been good had I had ever realized what I was building on my whole life.
Mm. Yeah, absolutely. We have a lot of folks that lose custody of their children.
Right.
And if we are in our defenses, there is a path of our defenses that can take us to suicide, that can take us to homicide.
Yeah.
And we didn't set out to head on that path.
Some people end up in a mental institution.
Yeah.
Some people are medicated.
Yeah. The important thing to understand in the river of cruelty is that all of these unintended consequences are important, and they are often the first thing that folks are coming to us to deal with, right? These are the things that are front and center in their lives. These are the complications that they're having to sort out. But when it comes to transformational change, that doesn't happen in the unintended consequences column. Problems don't get solved here. It's just the stuff that's in our lives because of how the river has played out for us. And so depending on the setting, sometimes our whole role is to help folks just manage the unintended consequences. But sometimes it's, hey, let's park that for a minute and shift to another area of the river. Because what really drives this river, what keeps it going, are the lessons that we learn from these experiences. Because when we are treated cruelly, yes, we have these big feelings, and yes, we try to protect ourselves from these feelings, but we also start to wonder, well, wait a second, am I undeserving? Am I ugly? Am I worth abandoning? Some of these are feelings, sad, afraid. Those come and go. But some of these are ideas. And as children, when we have that idea, we're like a scientist. Children are like teeny tiny scientists. And if they have that idea, what does a scientist do? They run an experiment and they look for evidence. And I don't know about you, but I can think of a time in my childhood where I absolutely was curious about whether or not I was invisible, because I had enough evidence that it might be true. And I remember sneaking into parties my parents were having and seeing, is anybody going to even notice me? What if I do this? What if I do this? If I'm in school, is anybody even going to notice me if I do this or if I do this? And I would notice when I was passed over, when I was looked over, when I was ignored. Evidence, evidence, evidence. And eventually, for a scientist, when they run an experiment, they come to a conclusion. Once I have enough evidence that that hypothesis has been answered, then I don't need to collect any more data. That question has been answered. And so that is how a belief is born. I am ugly. I am undeserving. I
And not
am.
good enough.
Thank you. And I no longer have to wonder if it's true or not. I know it's true. So now my challenge in life is, how do I manage that reality? And so if I just believe that I'm not good enough, I'm going to do all sorts of things to try to escape how crappy that feels. Pardon my language. I'm going to try to escape how yucky that feels. And I'm not interested in feeling my feelings. There's a big wall that goes up there. And so I just am going to stay in my defenses, but my defenses bring more consequences. And then I just get more evidence that, yep, I'm not good enough. I can't succeed anyway. And so I end up in this little eddy in the river. And how many folks have you worked with that say, I don't know how I got stuck here? Or I just feel stuck and I don't know how to do it different. Sheri, was that a part of your experience at all where you felt like, I don't know how, I'm stuck?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, and particularly after a situation, after an argument with my sister, I could easily see that I had done some things. Before I went to prison, I guess I felt a little stuck because I thought I was doing what I knew how to do, which was doing the most, and didn't even know how to get out of it because I was just so into it. Yeah, I feel like you definitely get stuck in some of those spots that you do not know what to do. You do not know how to change it. Thinking that I wasn't good enough, so why change anything? I'm not gonna be good enough anyway, so why do it different? Still not gonna be good enough. Never been good enough.
And so that feeling of just stuck, and then feeding those beliefs. I just heard you say that, oh, I'm not good enough anyway. Here I am feeding those beliefs.
Yeah, even if I
Sheri,
did that different, it wouldn't be right,
yeah.
because I know that. I spent my whole life learning I don't really do things right.
And so generally that is the idea of the river of cruelty. And I will tell you that we take this as a springboard for all sorts of conversations, specifically the off ramps. How do we get out? And there are really two ways out of the river. And so we spend 6 months just exploring that. But I want to kick it back to Dr. Limor. When we throw all of that stuff out, when you hear Sheri and I walk all of that out, what questions or comments come to mind?
Definitely, we have time for questions. I just want to thank you, ladies, Audra, and Sheri, for your transparency in this process. I mean, I see how this process can help people dealing with trauma, but even just in general with life, just, you know, the things that we go through and being able to go through these 5 steps. Because we do tend to re-internalize some of the bad things. I remember some movie I was watching, it's like, you know, it's easier to remember the negative than to change to go to the positive. And so we always are reinforcing the negative that we hear about ourselves. And so I thank you for that. It's very emotional, but I think very helpful in just being balanced individuals in our lives. So does anybody have any questions? I don't want to, you know, Tom Cook says, thank you for your presentation. It is definitely, like I say, helpful to any of us, those that are helping people with trauma and those that are going through trauma or going through life. Any other questions out there? Let me see.
While folks type questions, I just want to highlight what you just said, Dr. Limor, that as helpers, it is incredibly important. I have found great value in understanding my own river because this work is activating. Sheri saw me upset. Sheri saw me confused. Sheri saw me in my beliefs, right? In all of my, we call them, we talk about shadow and dive into that. Oh, Marge, that's a great question. The far right column is the ticket out. That's where we talk about the off ramps of the river. And it's really 2 of these columns are the ways out. And the first, you heard Sheri so beautifully navigate earlier, because if we're not afraid of our emotions, then we don't have to defend against them. If we're not afraid of how yucky these feelings feel, if we just know that our bodies know what to do with feelings, like you said, Dr. Limor, gosh, I'm feeling some feelings, right? This is emotional. And if we just know that, yep, they come and go like clouds in the sky, and my body has what it needs to feel its feelings, I'm safe, I can feel my feelings and be okay, then I don't have to be sarcastic. I don't have to go shop on Amazon. I don't have to do stuff to chase it away. I don't need to go have a glass of wine. I can just say, oh, I'm feeling sad. Oh, I'm feeling really afraid. And then all of this stuff just stops showing up. The other off-ramp is our beliefs. If we can understand that most of the data collected in those beliefs is through the eyes of a 4-year-old, and if you've hung out with a 4-year-old before, you know that like it's amazing wisdom. Kids are amazing observers and terrible interpreters, right? They're amazing creatures and they see everything, but they see it with eyes that are completely self-absorbed. And so there's a lot that's missed. And so if we can give ourselves permission to challenge those beliefs, we can start to find our way out of the river. What if it's not true that I'm ugly? What would be true instead? What if it's not true that I'm not good enough? Sheri, what's true instead? If it's not true that you're not good enough, what is true about Sheri? That Sheri is what?
Not good enough.
What's true if I'm not good enough?
If you know that not good enough is junk.
Oh, that's just such a
right?
wrong belief, because I know that I am. Today, I know that I am. I know that I've done the best I can. And even throughout my incarceration, I was still good enough. I did things in there that made me proud of who I was. And I love that I'm aware now. There was a thing that we did in our class every day. There was 4 emotions that we had to express which one fit us for the day: mad, sad, glad, or afraid. We went through a lot to understand what those emotions meant and what it did to us internally when we felt mad versus when we felt afraid, and how that reacts in your body. And even now, I've been out 2 years, I've been out of the class probably 3 years. I still ask myself on a regular basis, especially if I'm having a dispute or an altercation or a misunderstanding, like, this is making me mad, sad, glad, or afraid. Where am I right now? Because if I'm afraid, I need to figure that out. If I'm mad, I need to figure that out. I mean, anything can be figured out, but you have to be able to recognize your emotion. You have to recognize your feeling. And at almost any given time, you're going to hit one of those 4. Like right now, if you all thought about where you were right now in this moment, are you mad, sad, glad, or afraid? And once you recognize that and pinpoint it, then you can do something about it. But before, if I got mad, I was gonna cut you up with my words. I was gonna slice you up and probably in front of people and totally humiliate you. But now if I'm mad, I know I just need to figure that out. That's on me. It's not, you don't deserve any lashing out on that. So I love those emotions.
Sheri, that was beautifully described.
Yes.
And you could hear the fork in the road, right? That Sheri says, oh, there was a time in my life that my mad meant I was going to be cruel to you.
Yes.
And now if I can just feel my feelings and I'm open to talking about them, I can do something different.
Yeah. And so learning what your feelings are. I'm in a house right now where I have a 18-month-old living with me and my grandson and his little baby. And I love, love, love the opportunity right now when she's throwing her temper tantrums to tell her those words. You are mad, aren't you? You are so mad right now. Or when she's crying, that hurt, that made you sad. And so I'm trying so hard to express these 4 emotions because I want her to be able to repeat them to me in a couple of years. I'm sad right now. Instead of at 16 or 17, peer pressure leading her to drugs or something else because she doesn't know how to deal with emotions.
Exactly.
Can you all imagine if we had a grandma that helped us figure out what we were feeling? Y'all, that like we were building different worlds here. This is,
Exactly.
I love that.
Nobody ever
Definitely.
taught me what my feelings were, so I just think it's a different concept and it certainly can't hurt.
There's one more question we want to address, especially for those that are working in prison ministry. How do they get this kind of program into the areas that they're working in?
Yeah, so we were humming along. Miss Sheri was helping us with a program. We had 4 classes going. We were in the maximum security unit. We had built an alumni aftercare group that met regularly. We were building this community, and then COVID hit and everything shut down. And we spent that year, and by we, I mean the directors of Family Peace Initiative and myself and the co-facilitators that had been spending time in the facility. We were like, oh my gosh, we need to write this down. Whatever happens, wherever this thing is headed, we need to write this down so we remember exactly what we've been doing, because it's very different than what we're doing in our community groups. We've evolved. And so we spent the year writing it down. And we have now, to kind of for our own use and to offer the world, a facilitator guide that's 50 lesson plans that walk everyone through the time frame, how I built the thing from our director says, what does she say, from bit to shoe or something like that. I can't remember what she said, from top to bottom. And so we do have that available on our website. And that is really, those would be like the notes I would take in with me. But I will tell you that the Family Peace Initiative approach is not it doesn't live on the page. It lives in you. It lives in the connections that we build and the way that we approach the work, no matter what the topic is, no matter what the lesson plan is that day, if we even get to the lesson plan that day. And so that's where the facilitation training comes in. We are working we're helping people build programs. That's what we were doing in Bemidji with the probation, a whole 17 county area that's trying to incorporate some cool stuff. And so we're set up to help folks learn more about that approach and fold it into the way they do their work. But that's a great place to start is if you'd like to come to a training, we do have, there's a blog on our website that it is designed for BIP facilitators, but it's 6 years of monthly blogs of the director of our program just talking a little bit about the approach. And so if you want to get a flavor of how we do things and how we approach things, that's a great place to start that's free. And then if you want to get it into the prison, into a facility, we can help you do that. You can purchase the curriculum, you can come to a training, and then you can call us anytime you have questions or stories or challenges. That we love talking about this stuff. And so those are my favorite calls to get. So that's one way to get it going is to just give us a call or to start poking around on our site.
I just have to say that I don't know where everybody's at or where everybody's located, but it looks to me like people are all over the place here. I, of course, was in prison in Kansas, and I took probably 15 to 20 classes while I was there over my 12 and a half years that did nothing but better me. My Microsoft classes, parenting classes, I taught lots of parenting classes. This class, just the cognitive class, just so many programs I took. And so I heard so much about ministries so often when I was there. I never needed to utilize anything, but I still hear wonderful things about your service. And I know that y'all are very involved in the prison programs. But this has to be one of the best programs I took because it changed my way of thinking. It helped me view my life differently. And had I known, I didn't have to live the way that I lived. And now I know to do things differently the rest of my life.
Mm-hmm. Again, thank you, Audra and Sheri, for sharing. I mean, this really could go on for another hour or so. It's like you say, such powerful and such useful information. So again, we thank you for joining us on today. Cara is going to put up a few announcements that we have before we close out. We're a few minutes over, so you just stick with us just a couple more minutes and we can just go through our announcements real quick. Again, the Catholic Prison Ministry Coalition is always about delivering programs that will help in going forth in ministry or even in life. So we are out there doing that. The next program that's going to happen on next Wednesday, October 12th, is recognizing the dignity of life in the traumatized and broken. Again, that's almost like what we've just been talking about. How do we regain our dignity after being traumatized with guest speaker, Father Stan Bosch. He's a pastor and a clinical psychotherapist. So join us at the kind of same times as we do each month. So join us for that a workshop. The next one would be a series of developmental disabilities, incarceration and developmental disorders. So there's a couple of events that's coming up that are working in conjunction with each other. Deacon Larry Sutton, a PhD, a director of pre-theology formation at St. Vincent College and Seminary. So the first one on October 20th will be hygiene and human sexuality. And on Thursday, October 27th, relationship development. So join us for that. And then our rescheduled event, we had to reschedule because Bishop Cardinal Tobin was not going to be available. He had called. When you get a call from Rome, you have to go. So Reclaiming Wholeness, Addiction, Recovery, and Community has been rescheduled to November 1st at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time, again, hosted by Cardinal Tobin. So we're going to pray that he does not get called to Rome again. But definitely join us for any and all of these programming. This ministry is here to help those that are doing prison ministry, especially just to be a resource to you so that you will have the tools that you need. We don't know, not one ministry, not one way of doing things. We always have different people that we are encountering in prison ministry. So all of these tools help to build our toolbox and doing prison ministry. Again, Audra and Sheri, I cannot thank you enough for being part of our workshop and town hall on today. It was phenomenal. And again, we just thank you for being transparent. It's hard to be transparent in front of new people too sometimes. And it does when I know, Sheri, when you're going through it, it does bring back those emotions that, you know, you think you're over it and then you start to talk about it again and it comes up. And so we thank you for, again, wanting to share, but also being open to sharing those raw emotions that we continue to work on. So again, thank you all, both of you, for sharing that. Again, everyone, be blessed as we go forth in the rest of this month of October. It seems to be moving pretty quick. Pretty soon we'll be at Thanksgiving and Christmas. But the year is going very quickly. So any suggestions that you might have, please reach out to the Catholic Prison Ministry Coalition on our website and give us any feedback on any of the workshops and town halls or any suggestions for upcoming workshops and town halls. We appreciate that. Again, everyone have a blessed day and we will see you the next time.